without further ado, let's introduce our special guests. Gerry and the TEDxRiodelaPlata team have been with us. I want to say from the very early days of the program. I had lunch with Gerry recently, and he told me that they were kind of thinking of something like TEDxRiodelaPlata even before TEDx was born. And so when TEDx was born, it was a great platform from which to launch their passion. Certainly have grown, if not certainly have grown to one of the largest TEDx events around the globe. But more importantly, an event that is at meaningful scale, but also has deep meaning to the community and creates not only great ideas worth spreading, but also very engaged community and high demand. So today, we wanted to talk to Gerry about some of the things that his team did there to achieve what they've achieved. Gerry is also, as you know, the ambassador for Southern Cone for TEDx, and also spearheading a very important initiative on behalf of TED and TEDx, the TED en Español initiative, working with many of you very, very closely. And he has the benefit and the pleasure of discovering all the great ideas that come from all the Spanish-speaking events, all the other great ones that create more and more great talks. So it's great that we have your collective eyes and Gerry's curation skills to help put a light and shine a light on those. So I'm going to let you kick off in a second, Gerry, but essentially our focus today is just thinking about how to grow your event in numbers, but also in meaning. This hangout and this conversation is not focused on getting everybody to do an event with 10,000 people. In fact, that's probably specifically not the purpose of today's call. It is really thinking about how to grow from 50 to 100, from 100 to 200, for maybe, wherever you are, just growing a little bit more, and then adding more meaning and not necessarily just the number of attendees to your events. So we're going to kick off. Welcome, Gerry. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Jay. It's great being here and seeing so many familiar faces.
Indeed, and I see already we have the population on this gathering is skewing Spanish speakers already.
I can tell.
And in some cases, your neighbors from Brazil. So why don't we kind of just kick off? I know you've got so much to share with us, but why don't you talk us through kind of the couple of main challenges that you experienced, one or two or three top ones, as you have worked to scale the size and impact of your event?
Yeah, okay. So the very first event we ran was in early 2010, and we had 67 people in the audience. So that was the first event. And from then on, we decided as a team that we wanted to grow in impact as much as we could over time. And growing in impact has two legs. The first one, probably the most important one, is growing in quality, because you have impact through quality and not through sheer size. And then with sheer size, to take advantage of hopefully reasonable quality of the content. So we went from 67 people to 1,000 people. Then we ran a few other smaller events, 250 people. And then we jumped to 1,500. And that was already quite a leap. Going from 67 to 1,500 was a huge leap. And then from then on, we decided to take it as far as we could. And since 2014, we are running really large events, the largest we could in indoor venues, and that's for 10,000 people. So this year is our 5th edition of the largest event, the 10,000 person event. And we faced a lot of challenges going through the process, both in terms of maintaining and hopefully growing quality, but then also reaching to so many people. So that's the timeline, the setup. In terms of growing, I think there are two dimensions of growth. One is size, not just of the people coming to the event, but also how many people you reach afterwards with the video. And the second dimension is through other means. And that's a really broad spectrum of things you could do, all the way from improving the talks themselves to going through format innovation to try to do something else from the stage, to doing other initiatives, taking advantage of other TED initiatives like the TED clubs, which are a great engine for growth and impact, to other things that each of us as organizers could come up with within the rules of the TEDx events. Let me stop there, Jay, and get your reactions on where we should focus the conversation.
Well, let's start with the size first. So maybe talk us through your process of going from 67 events to 250 to 1500. That's really the sweet spot for most of us TEDx organizers that we see.
Yeah.
What were the big challenges there, and what was the process for you?
Yeah, the first idea that we tried to work with was to always be behind the demand, so that in every single event we made sure that more people did not make it to the event because we didn't have enough room that people that did make it. So that managing scarcity is part of the challenge, because this has to be an aspirational thing. People want to come here, and although we want to make it as big as possible, we would love to have more people that want to come that actually we can fit in the event. So just as an example, for our latest 10,000 person event, we had 50,000 people sign up to come. So roughly, depending on the event, it was somewhere from 3-1 to 10-1, and the number of people that sign up to our capacity at the event. And
so
that creates...
That's an interesting, obviously it's a very compelling idea, because you create excitement and everybody wants to get into the nightclub that they can get into, as you know. But how did you know? And how did you, because it's quite difficult to get demand for 250 tickets, not to mention for 1500 tickets, not to mention have extra people waiting in the sidelines. How do you kind of architect that?
Yeah, so the first thing is that we decided that all our events were going to be free. So we don't charge for a ticket. So that's a big decision, both in terms of how we attract people, what type of people we attract, but also in terms of the business model behind each of the TEDx events. Of course, we need to make it sustainable. So not charging for a ticket, it's a huge strategic decision in terms of financing the events. So that's the initial consideration. The second one is...
So yeah. Remember your second consideration, but I want to dig deeper on this free thing.
Yeah.
So one thing that I hear consistently from TEDx organizers, but also when we do things at TED, is that free doesn't always generate great demand. Is that in fact sometimes people look at free as something that, oh, sure, I'll book the ticket, but then I don't show up last minute because I think it's free. So how important it can be. You understand, I know that you understand the psychology of putting value in something. What did you do to make free appear so valuable?
Well, the fact that if you got a ticket, you were so lucky because 4 other people didn't get a ticket if you got one. So that made it, most of your friends didn't get a ticket and you did. So that made the value of the ticket go beyond just the monetary value. It's not just money, it's the fact that you can go to a place where many people would like to go but didn't get the ticket.
And the way you orchestrated that, did you have a specific mechanism on your website so people applied and then you only granted it to a few of them? Is that how it works?
Yeah. So the way it works, at least the way we run it, is we have a period where people can sign up for the lottery for the tickets over a period of 2 or 3 months. So everyone signs up, and no matter when you signed up, you have equal chances. And then we just run a lottery, essentially a random number generator on Excel, a huge Excel spreadsheet. And then the people that won the lottery got the ticket and the others did not.
Okay, that's interesting. This is also a very relevant lesson to TEDx University events, because in many student events, they like to keep the tickets free, but then a lot of people don't show up last minute while other people have been turned at the door. So it's an interesting mechanism to put in place. Okay, so free.
But hold on. We still have a no-show rate, a significant no-show rate that we learn to measure. I mean, over time, given our events and depending on the day of the week, whether it was rainy or shiny, it was a nice day or not, and things like that, that drives a lot the no-show rate. And by now we have some numerical models that work for our event. Obviously, each event would need to build their own models. To predict how many tickets we need to assign to have a full house.
Okay.
And obviously you run the risk of overselling and underselling and all of that.
Okay, good. All right, so that was the first thing, and then I cut you off as you were about to go into your second point.
Yeah, so the second thing is that to make sure that you set the standard of quality at such a high level that people understand by the second time they come to one of our events that they are coming to something that we do with excellence. I mean, of course we screw up once in a while. I mean, we make mistakes, but people know that we are trying our best to give them the best possible experience. Like in our country, for instance, it's very unusual to have punctual events. We always run late. So in our very first event, we made it a big deal within the team to start exactly at 9:00 a.m. And we made it visible to everyone. And a few people came in late for that time and only that time. From then on, they would always be sharp on time and be lining up to come in like an hour and a half before the event.
Right.
Because they didn't want to miss anything. And of course, we were late a couple of times because we had technical issues, as everyone does, but we made a deal with ourselves to do our best possible effort to make it not just punctual, but the best event possible. And people appreciate that. Like one of the things we do, for instance, is with a very few exceptions, the speakers we have are not well-known people. Most of those people, you see their names and they don't mean anything before you see their talks, before you see them on stage. So people sign up to come to the events not because they want to watch this or that talk, but rather because they know by now that they're going to have a good experience, that they're going to learn something.
Sorry, finish your sentence.
That they're going to learn something and that they're going to run into interesting people, and that they're going to come out of the event feeling better about themselves. So that's the value proposition.
Yeah. So quality, aiming for excellence. Are there any additional dimensions? So you spoke obviously high quality talks and ideas, well presented from the stage is key to your event. I know your organizing team. It's all like it's not just about the talks, but you are all about the talks. So that's one. Logistics of the event, you've mentioned, kind of adhering to an organized day. What are other elements in your event that communicate excellence?
Yeah, we think about the experience of people coming to the event across the day, and even before the event and after the event. And we want to make sure that they're going to have a good experience throughout, not just watching good talks, but also that they're going to be comfortable, that they're going to be well fed, hopefully, which is obviously a big challenge when you scale up. That they will see something that is not that common, at least in some of our countries, to have something that is free and at the same time is as professional as it gets. So they feel taken care of for the most part. Obviously, when you have a huge event, the seats are not as comfortable as when you have a tiny event and things like that. But we make our best and our best effort to make sure that they have the best experience possible.
I came to, I think, what was your second event in your recent series in your current venue. And I have observed that even though there were 10,000 people in the room, the event felt very intimate and that there was a very good energy and connection. The sense of resonance in the room was really kind of palpable. How do you engineer that?
Yeah, so when we went from 1,500 to 10,000, our main fear in the team was that people would not shut up. So that people in the audience will keep whispering and talking, and you could feel that. And if you multiply that times 10,000, it would be really annoying. So when the first speaker came on stage, we were we were tense, we were nervous, anxious to see what would happen. And when the 10,000 people made deep silence, that was the loudest silence I could hear, I heard in my life. It was overwhelming silence, because it's not the same to feel silence in an empty room than in a room full of so many people. And when then the speaker said something that triggered either applause or laughter or even standing ovation, when you multiply that times 10,000, the feeling is just overwhelming. It's something that I don't think very many people felt before. And the fact that you can feel that is something not just for the speaker, but everyone sitting there, you are part of something really special. So I think we took a risk.
For that matter, I would say, if I may, 10,000 is amazing. It's pretty amazing at 1,500 too, right?
Absolutely,
Because
absolutely.
I think the main TED Theater in Vancouver is 1,500 people, and when everybody's standing up and there's a roar, it's like you know, I think anywhere 500 and up, you get a lot of, depending on the room, you get a lot of that feeling.
Absolutely. As you grow up, there are a few technical things I'd like to mention, because we made some mistakes in the initial tries. Like sound, the sound is absolutely fundamental to create that intimacy that we want to have in our events. So if we keep saying this, but I want to repeat it. If you have an extra $100, spend them on sound, on making sure that the sound is the best possible sound you can get. That it doesn't have echoes, that it reaches everywhere, that everyone can hear without being too loud or too soft, and that it feels natural, without delays and things like that. So that's number one, making sure the sound is good, that you have a good sound engineer working with you. The second one is lighting. You can make an event extremely cold or warm using lighting. And not just lighting of the stage, which is the obvious lighting, but also the lighting of the audience. And this is something that I think each event has to find the sweet spot between too much lighting or too little lighting in the audience. But my feeling is that the more lighting, the better. Obviously, if it becomes annoying for the audience, that's not good. But you want, as a speaker, to be able to connect with the audience. And it is quite a bit of money when you need to shine light into so many people in an even way, but it pays off. Then you have the hosting decision, how you host the event, and that adds a lot to the culture of the event, to how you relate to people, how people receive each of the speakers, how they respect them, and how they recognize them with a huge applause and things like that. So investing in developing the right hosting for each of your events is also critical. And then the final thing we learned is that the bigger you get, the more critical it becomes to have on-stage rehearsals the day before. With a theater that is ready to go, all the setup and the construction has taken place, and everything is exactly the way it's going to be the following day at the event, except for the audience. The audience is still not there, but you have the seats, the lighting, the sound, the cameras are there, everything is there. That takes quite a bit of planning and money to be able to do it, because you need the crew to start a day earlier, you need the crew to be there for rehearsals, you need the speakers to come a day earlier for those on-stage rehearsals, but it makes a huge difference, particularly because most of our speakers don't have as much stage experience, particularly in big settings, in big venues. So if they're going to go on stage for the very first time in such a venue with the audience there, they're going to make faces and try to check the sound, and they'll forget their talk. So in the day before, when we run the rehearsal, we run the full talks. It's not just a sound check rehearsal. It's a rehearsal that takes the full day. It's running the full event from beginning to end with every single aspect of the event. The AV support, the sound, the speakers, we even ask them to wear the same clothing they're going to wear the following day. We learned that in a funny way. It's funny now. It wasn't funny at the time. We had this fantastic speaker. She's 92 years old. She's a dancer. She created a huge dance movement in Argentina, and you were there that day.
I was.
And she came with she. While she talked, she would move and dance, and then she was really interesting to see. But she was wearing comfortable clothing without belts. So she had a pair of trousers, and we had to stick the mic on her trousers. And the mic is somewhat heavy, but she was not wearing a belt. So as she started dancer, her pants were coming down. And at some point, she said, "I think I'm going to be naked in a minute or so," in the middle of the talk. So that's why after that we learned that we need to wear exactly the same clothing for the rehearsal than you're going to wear the next day.
To assure everybody who's like listening to this suspenseful talk, they did stop the talk. Somebody came, tightened up the pants, and attached the microphone to another part. But yes, that's a great example. I've never heard of that, of actually doing dress rehearsals literally with the dress. So that's a good idea. Okay, Gerry. So all are these the elements to make sure that there's quality and intimacy in the room? If I've got $1,000 to spend and I need to spread it between sound, video, and lighting, how would you divide it up?
Yeah, I think sound, you need to get to a level of sound that is good. So we always say that a good video of a TEDx talk is good if you have good sound. If the video is okay, it's fine. But if the sound is not okay, it's not something that people are going to watch. Obviously, then the video has to be reasonably well, but you don't need to have 14 cameras as we do in the large event. Sometimes with 2 or 3 cameras, that's enough if you have good lighting. And that's critical to have a photography director, someone who plays that role, that looks after the right lighting, the lighting, the speaker lighting, the background lighting, the logo lighting, that everything matches and you're not burning something or having someone in the dark. That makes a big difference for the quality of the video.
So if I want to summarize it in a catchy kind of way, would it be fair to say that you have to have outstanding sound, great lighting, and reasonably good camera work?
Yeah, the camera work has 2 parts. The first one is the quality of the camera itself, and then the operator makes a big difference as well. Because you can have a great camera but not get the right shots, and then you're in trouble when trying to put together the video afterwards. So that's why it's also so important to have the camera operators the day before and have a camera director that is going to tell them exactly what to do, what to shoot. And there is a risk when we bring people that are used to live events, because in a live event, you only care about the live feed and you don't care about having the video afterwards. So those people tend to only be shooting carefully when the right light is on for their camera. And that's not what we need. We need 3, 4, whatever number of cameras you have that are shooting the right way all the time. Because then when we edit the video, we need to be able to go back to the raw footage and remix it so that the final product is as good as it gets.
That's interesting.
So we need to be careful because some of the people we hire for the technical part, that they might be coming from different types of events or backgrounds. So we need to adjust for that.
I'm going to ask you a question in a minute about talking about funding events as they grow, but I want to take a minute to just let Anna from TEDxLACADOR ask a question. Anna, I see you on video. Do you want to unmute your question? Hi.
Hi, Jay. Hi, everybody. Hi, Gary. We are planning to go a little bit bigger next year, not so much. But one of the things that we are afraid is about the breaks, the coffee breaks and lunch, what to do to make people feel comfortable. And we usually put the food in the ticket. People pay to go to our event, but they have 2 coffee breaks and lunch. So how did you do with food?
Yeah,
Great
the
question.
the first thing, Anna, is that in the large events, people don't expect to get free food. That's a mistake we made earlier on. We thought that we had to feed them for free, but people understand if you're putting an event, a non-for-profit event where you don't charge a ticket, they are okay paying for food, at least in our culture, and I think that might be a global phenomenon as well. So you can.
Also because your event is free, right?
Yeah, of course. If you
If
charge a
you
big
pay
ticket, then you,
$50, yeah.
yeah, of course. Um, then we the most difficult part is lunch, obviously, because that's where people are the most hungry, and we have the challenge of serving food to so many people in a very short period of time. Because even though you might have an hour and a half for the lunch break, they are all hungry and they all want to have lunch right away when they leave the previous session. So what we are doing now is we are giving the option for people to pre-buy their lunch, and we standardize it to three options. We have I think it's meat, veggie, and vegan, or something like that, or yeah, whatever. I mean, three options, and then people select their option, and then our food provider knows how many sandwiches they need to make of each of those in advance, which gives them great information not to make too many or too few. Um, and then people have their tickets as they go out into the lunch break, there are a bunch of people with the lunch box ready to go. So they show their ticket and they exchange it for the bag that has the sandwich, an apple, a brownie, and a soda or whatever. And then they go and typically have a picnic style lunch where people hang out. If the weather is good and you have room outside, it typically is a great experience to go and get together with people that you might not know, to talk about what you've seen so far at the event, and while eating lunch. That's a great experience. For the breaks, the morning break or the afternoon break, we give them the option to buy coffee and maybe a brownie or something like that, or a snack. And we had in some of the events we had sponsors that gave them free water or soft drinks. That helps a lot because you need for people to hydrate in a way, and we are looking for ways to make it more sustainable. Whether we should have water dispensers and give them like glasses that are more sustainable, that they could recycle. That's good. We haven't reached that point yet because it's hard to do it for so many people in an economical way as well. So there are maybe other events solved it in a better way. But the most important
Thank you
thing
for
for the
that.
breaks is yeah, just one more thought on the breaks. It's good, particularly for the large events, to give enough time for the break. For the short, the smaller events, we had half an hour breaks or 45 minutes. Here, you cannot go for more than 1,500 people. It's hard to go to shorter than an hour. Because it takes already 10 minutes to go out and to come back in, and you need people to be able to go to the toilet and refresh and just talk among themselves.
Mario, I see that you were
Okay, thank
nodding
you.
your head. Thank you, Anna, for your question. And Mario, I see that you were nodding your head because that was your next question. I have it in front of me, but I think Gerry just answered it. It was when I attended that event afterwards. That was one of the biggest takeaways because it took so long for people to leave, and even an event at 500 or 1,000, unless you're using a theater that has capacity, has capacity for that many people and has room on site to feed people during the break, you got to allow time for people movement or anything that's kind of stretches the limit of the venue. And I see here a note that Bill had a thought to share. I think it was perhaps something related to the lunch and the coffee. Bill, do you want to? I don't see you on video from my view here, but maybe you can unmute your phone and unmute your line. Bill, are you there?
He's typing.
Oh, he's typing. Okay. Well, we're gonna look for it and we're gonna see it. So thank you, Bill. We're looking forward to hear from you. And Gerry, tell us. Let's talk about money. So without revealing the budget of your event, I remember, and actually now I don't remember specifics, but I remember looking at it at one point, and I was surprised because I thought it was going to be much more expensive compared to what I saw, and I think you have somehow managed to build in a lot of pro bono. What have been your secrets and your biggest tips in terms of building a tight budget?
Actually, I don't mind sharing the number. Actually, it's a public number. We every year we produce a report. We call it the impact report, where we say everything we did during the year, how much money we got, and how we spent it, and that's public. We've been doing it for 5 years now. That annual report. So last year our budget was around total budget for the year. We ran different events. We had salon events and other stuff, and we did TEDx clubs as well. It was around $600,000, which is a huge amount for a small event, but it's a relatively reasonable amount for everything we did. Obviously, most of us are volunteers. We have 200 people working at TEDxRiodelaPlata in some way or another. All but 3 or 4 are volunteers. We have 3 or 4 people that have part-time compensation for what they do because they had to give up other jobs to be able to do this. So we have a growing budget, and the big question is how to build a sustainable business model to support it. And I think that's critical for all of our events, no matter what the size is. Obviously, we have a bunch of different possibilities to raise money within the rules. Obviously, selling tickets is one of them, but that's, as I said, initially a strategic decision you have to make whether you want to do it or not. The second one is sponsors. I think sponsors is what most of us go to find the money. Now, my experience with sponsors that have covered maybe 90% of our accumulated budget to date over the last 9 years is that it is much more difficult to get a new sponsor than to renew a very happy sponsor that you had for some time. So we invest quite a bit in getting new sponsors, but once we have them, we invest even more in making sure that they are really happy. That they are our partners, that this is not just a money-related thing where they give us money and then we forget about them, but rather we find ways for them to contribute to the experience at the event, particularly during the breaks. So we
you have a big success story to share, because I think on a conceptual level, that's what everyone is trying to do, but share and
Yeah, so let me give you one example. We had a few years ago, Samsung was one of our sponsors, and they were launching their 3D virtual reality headsets. So what they did was they hired 2 very recognized artists that would draw in real time. They will make drawings based on what the speaker was saying on stage in a structure they built outside. So and they would shoot that in 3D, 360, all of that, so that people could see them working during the breaks. But then afterwards, they could see their interpretation of the content they were listening to on the wall with the 360 gadgets. So it was adding an experience for people to try the headsets as they were coming out. That was the news that year. They would see art in real time with good artists. they would be able to enjoy that later, and that they will be able to connect with our content in a different way. So it helped in many dimensions, and everyone was happy. We were happy, Samsung, the company, was happy, and people had a good experience interacting with them. That's just one example out of many.
That's good. So ticket sales, sponsorship sales, anything unusual that you do? Because I feel like you get a lot. By the way, the 600,000, Bill Wong was asking 600,000, it's US dollars, right?
Yes, yes.
Which I can just give for perspective. I mean, once events go into the 1,000 and above, I mean, we see budgets exceeding $1 million, easily. So just to give people a proportion, that's. But I think you get a lot of pro bono stuff. You get a lot of free stuff. I feel like. How do you do it, and what do you get for free?
Yeah.
And then, by the way, after you answer this, I'm opening up for questions. I've got a few lining up here. So give me a quick answer, Gerry, and then we're going to open it up.
Yeah, so we have in-kind donations, in-kind support from many sponsors as well. Our rough estimate is that it is roughly as much money as we get in cash, give or take, because it's hard to sometimes quantify. And it works in certain cases and it doesn't work in others. And we learned that the hard way. The one that works the best is the venue itself. If you can get the venue as an in-kind support from the owner of the venue, that typically works out very well. The one that we tried a lot and couldn't make work well is airline support for the tickets for the speakers that come from abroad or that they have to fly to come to the event. And the reason for that is that most airlines will only give you support for the routes they fly themselves. Because if they have to use another codeshare airline, then they are paying cash for that. And if they don't want to give you cash and they only want to give you in kind, your speakers end up flying through ridiculous itineraries to get to the event, and that is not good. So we tried that for a couple of years, and then we discontinued that. And if an airline wants to be our partner, we ask them for cash. And then we might use them with them or with someone else, depending on where people are flying from. So yeah, finding creative ways of companies to supporting things is great. One thing we learned along the way, which I think it's an important learning, is that we only value at market value what they support, what they give us, if that's something that we would have bought from the market to run our event. So if they want to give presents to the attendees to promote something, that doesn't count. But if they are giving us airplane tickets or a venue, of course, we value that, and then we assign them to the right category of sponsorship depending on the market value of whatever they are giving us.
I think that's a really, really important lesson, and I do the same. For example, with TED Fest, where when we're looking for funding for that, it's a similar thing. Okay, so let's get some questions. I have Sumyajit here, and then I'm going to go to Jose. So Sumyajit, I see you on video. You want to ask your question?
Yeah. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah, hi. This is Sumyajit from TEDx Techno India University. So I had been to this TEDx MSRIT in Bangalore, and my university had sponsored for me to go there. So what I found was that, being the only person from the university going to a different place altogether, I felt kind of lonely. I was not, engaging with the audience. Of course, I went by myself and had a word with the speakers, some of the speakers, and that was the only way of contact for me. But then that is something I had to do by myself. So what I'm trying to understand is, if my audience, some of the audience, they are not exactly, introvert, they are introverts, or they are not exactly extroverts for the matter, how do I get them to engage so that it does not become a boring event? Okay, I'm just coming and hearing talks and then I go. I want them to I want this to become an engaging experience. And second point being, to bring it into context, it's I have a license for 100 only attendee, so not as for, I don't have the 100 plus license as of now. So how do I put it in my event? That's it. Thank you.
So let me try to answer the first question, and I let you, Jay, answer the second question. Regarding introverts, particularly introvert newbies, so people that come to an event for the very first time and they are introverts at the same time, which, by the way, is not an issue just for TEDx, but it's also an issue for TED in Vancouver. I mean, we have discussions at TED on how to make sure we incorporate those people with the right tools. So we tried a few things in TEDxRiodelaPlata. One of those was in a few of the events, if you won a ticket through the lottery, you won not just one ticket, but 2 tickets. So you could, I mean, we assigned half the number of winners, but they would come with a friend or a family member or something, so that we made sure that at least you knew at least one person at the event. The other thing we tried a lot, particularly, and it works particularly well for youth events, is to have games, to play games with people. Like, let me tell you just one. We had this event where we had a main venue for 600 people and then another venue with simulcast for another 600 people. So the total size of the crowd was 1,200, and we had 3 sessions. So the first 600 people to arrive in the venue would go to the main, where the main venue where the speakers were for the first session. The second 600, so the second half of the attendees that arrived in the morning would go to the second session. So the question was how to assign the spots for the third session to the 600 people that were going to see the third session live. And we had this game in one of the breaks. In each of the badges, each attendee had not just their names, but also a number, a 3-digit number. That was repeated. So if your number was 327, there was another person at the event with the same number you had. So the game at the break was go and find your twin. And the 300 twins that got together first got the pass for the final session. And the chaos that happened during that break was one of my best memories of the last 10 years. It was fantastic how people were, I mean, writing with lipstick their name on their forehead and just shouting and whatever. I mean, they were extremely creative in finding ways of getting a seat for that final session. And many of them spent that final session together, despite the fact that they didn't know each other up until 5 minutes ago, but they were hugging each other and they became good friends. So coming up with creative ways that sometimes we first feel that would only work for kids or for youngsters, they most likely would also work for older people as well, because we all like this type of games. So using creativity to do that, I think goes a long way to bridge that gap that you were discussing or mentioning.
That was a beautiful example. Thank you, Gerry, for that. I'll quickly hit on the second point. And I guess the question was how to go beyond the 100 limit. So that is one of the biggest pain points for organizers all around the world, and something we're trying to solve in the long term. And we have a few ideas that we're working on, but for the foreseeable future, I think you've got to find creative ways to make your way to a TED event, and there are creative ways to do that. You can grow your event with a simulcast alongside it and work with your sponsors and partners to increase the budget. Your trip to a TED event should be funded by your event, and as you grow your event, a lot of what we see is people get enough of a budget in their 100 event to make the trip, get qualified, and work with the partners to support you this year so that next year you could do a bigger event together. We can take that offline because I don't want to be talking today. I want Gerry to talk today, but our team can help you with some more ideas. And you can send it to, like, Taylor would be a good place to start on social media. All right, so then Jose, and by the way, I have so many questions and time is running out. So Gerry, I need fast answers from you, okay?
Okay, I'll be short.
I'll ask you one live question, then I'm going to give you 4 questions from 4 different people I'm going to ask. We're going to do rapid fire. So Jose wants to talk about how do you keep your team energized. I saw, Jose, you want to unmute?
Hi, all. Yeah, over time, a lot of teams get a sort of TED fatigue after several events, and they end up breaking up or a lot of events after 3 or 5 years they just disappear. So how do you fight that TED fatigue in your team to get it going, keep it going after so many years?
I make it interesting for myself. So my feeling is that if we find ways to make it interesting for ourselves, each of us, then that's going to be contagious for the rest of the team. If you don't enjoy it anymore, then it's time for you to move on and find someone else to take over for you. And of course, we look after people. I mean, I like hanging out with people, and some of them might take a year off because they need to focus on something else, or they might go through becoming parents or whatever. And we do that, and we accommodate all the needs. Some people spend more time, others spend more little time, but we have very explicit conversations about that, hopefully with every single member of the team once every so often, to make sure we accommodate all the needs. And if someone has to move on, that's fine as well. I mean, there has to be some rotation along the way.
Thank you. And I would say probably Chris Anderson, without articulating so effectively as you did, Gerry, I would say observing him, how he keeps an energized team of people around him, obviously not on a volunteer basis, but in a competitive job market too. He keeps it interesting for himself, and then everybody, kind of people come along for the ride. So it can work in a volunteer context, in a business context, and obviously not everybody sticks around you, Gerry, right? Some people may not find what you find interesting. So there are a lot of teams that refresh the organizing teams as well. So you look to re-energize yourself and then reorganize your team as needed. All right, 4 rapid questions. Thank you, Jose, for your question. 4 rapid questions. So this one is from Sravana, and also from TEDx Techno India University. What do you do to make sure that attendees keep coming to your event year after year?
We don't do much. I mean, it's just whatever happens. Our statistics is that roughly between 40 and 50% of the attendees every year are coming for the very first time. And that's okay. I mean, we do have also some rotation because we have such a large number of people that want to come to the event, and we run this lottery. So just statistically, it's very unlikely that the very same people are going to come every single year. At the same time, I'm concerned that if people feel that if they come once, they've come and that's it, they don't want to come again, I don't like that. I mean, I want to build a community that will be hopefully looking forward to coming again every single year, so that this becomes more like reading a book or going to the movies. You never say, I'm not going to read a book, I already read one. Or I'm not going to the movies, I've already gone to the movies. I mean, you don't see that. But there is a risk that people will say that with our events. So we need to make sure we think about how to communicate what we do so that the experience is not coming once, but rather using this as a way to feed your interests or learning or whatever you do at the events.
Thank you. Next question is from Safra at TEDx Colombo. Do you use social spaces, or is your event only talks?
We have day-long events, so we definitely need social spaces. And we are lucky because we have a fantastic venue, particularly when we have good weather, because it's this huge 10,000 person indoor venue stadium. But then outside they have a beautiful gardens and places where people can hang out. And that's critical because they need time to process what they've gone through in the previous session. It's really hard to do events, particularly long events, for the full day in theaters, because theaters typically don't have enough room for us to do nice breaks around them. So theaters are good for salon or very short one-session events, but I would not recommend the traditional theater for longer events.
And this topic you touched on, but maybe you can provide one more example. How do you keep your sponsors happy? We're having problems renewing sponsorships this year. This is from Angelica at TEDx UMSA. So I know you've mentioned one example, maybe another nugget or so.
Yeah, so that's a huge challenge because typically the sponsors are not the companies, but rather the manager you're dealing with at the company. And those also move on sometimes. And we had issues where we had a huge sponsor, actually, that was our sponsor for 7 years straight. And the CEO and the top management loved us. And then the CEO stepped down and the new guy changed completely the top management. And we started from scratch and never came back. So that happens. I mean, there is a life cycle view of your sponsors, and you need to understand that sometimes they might go away, but you need to make sure you invest as much as possible in renewing and making sure they are happy. Understand what their goals are by participating and making sure you provide everything within the rules for them to exceed their expectations so that they want to come back the next year. Now, if they don't come back, shit happens, and that could be the case. So you should be always looking out for new ones as well, for new sponsors as well.
And Angelica, there's a lot of information about sponsors in the TEDx Hub. Questions on sponsors are always ranking in the top 3 most popular searches, and there's a lot of materials there from other TEDx organizers on how they position their events and how they retain or sponsors. So take a look there for some extra ones. And then Anna, why don't you help us bring this wonderful session to a close by asking the final question. You had another question here on the size of the team. You want to go ahead and ask it?
Yes. So I think you have a main team that works over the year. It's how many people, and at the day of the event, how many people works in your team?
Yeah. In our case, it's really hard to count the people in the team because we also have spin-offs or teams that focus on something very specific. The core team is 32 people. Those are the people that lead something about the event. But one person in the team is in charge of translators and subtitles. And she, in turn, has a team of, say, around 10 people. So it's hard to count how many people we have in total. We estimate it's between 150 and 200 people. For the day of the event, we have a bunch of volunteers that come to help us with, movements and things like that. And it's probably double that number. But it's hard to tell as well because they don't stay for the whole day. They come and go and things like that. But again, this is for 10,000 people. So you don't need to have such a big team for other events.
But the ratio, what do you think about the ratio of core team to team on the day of the event?
It depends a lot on how you work. The core team, we get together every month for a monthly meeting. We also have every other week a curation meeting with part of that team. And we have almost everyday meetings going on with sub-teams that look after different things, social networks or sponsors or whatever we do. Let me, Jay, I want to share just one thought before we close, because we spoke about growing in terms of size, but I think there is another avenue for growth that doesn't even require the 100+ license to do, which is how do we leverage our platform to do other stuff? And just to give you just the titles, because we don't have time to go into the details, but we came up with the idea of running scientific experiments during our events. So we, in one slot for a talk of 18 minutes or less, we ask ourselves, can we play with our community, both the people that are present there, but also people following online, to try to answer a scientific question for which we do not know the answer yet. So this is not just to illustrate science, but actually to do real science. And we've done it now for 5 years, and 3 papers came out in peer-reviewed journals coming out of that. And it was a great thing to do, and people love it. That's one example. Another example is that we sort of jokingly think of the 10,000 person audience as the large choir. So this is a choir that only rehearses once a year because that's how often we get together. And one of our team members is a director, and we play games with the audience and say, well, remember last year in our previous rehearsal with this, now we are going to do this. And we sometimes we bring surprise people that start singing on top of them. And last time we sang the national anthem, and people love it and they got moved. It felt a little bit like the previous minutes before the World Cup games, where people sing in the stadium, you know. So that's another one. We do contemporary art. So we try to think, we bring an artist and we curate with that, we work with that artist as curators, and we help that artist put together either an installation or an experience or something that would last, say, 10 minutes from the stage, engaging everyone else. Like for the last year we had with our cell phone lanterns, you had to answer yes or no to questions the artist was asking from the stage, and we had a camera from the ceiling showing the collective response of very intimate answers to really tough questions. So in a sense, it is intimate, but at the same time we are all seeing the galaxy of those stars forming. Anyway, crazy artist stuff. And so on. So there are so many things we could do. And one of the things that I encourage everyone to look into is to get involved with TED clubs. As you know, TED is a huge another initiative within TED. And the way we are developing that in Argentina, working with other TEDx organizers in the country, and that's growing exponentially, and these are teenagers giving short talks in their schools, and we are teaching their teachers how to do it, and it's a fantastic experience as well. So there are many other ways of growing and getting involved that go beyond the 100 plus or whatever number you want to do in your event. And my suggestion is always to step on solid ground. So to obviously take some risks, but only when you see that demand is there and that you can do it in the best possible way. Because you got to think long term. This is not just the one shot, but we are building a brand. We are building a community in all our countries, in our regions, and we need to look after each other, not just our one event, but our long-term future for each of our events, and also the long-term future of the whole community.
Thank you, Gerry. I could listen to you talk for, I think, another hour, because I absolutely love this example of growing, not just in the number of people coming to your event, but also just the meaning and the impact and the creativity. We've learned a lot today. We've heard about the logistics of growing your events when it comes to sound and lighting and talks, the importance of excellence in everything that you do in creating experiences and connections. I like a couple of the one-liners you gave us. Keep it interesting for yourself, step on solid ground, and I'm sure I will pick up a few more when I listen to this over again. Thank you for all the work that you do. I know there's about 200 team members. I see Ache here on the video. All of you together, Gerry will tell you, it's not just the organizer, it's their entire team. It's all of you on this call who come here and listen and learn on all the events that you do. And hopefully this was an interesting learning experience to all. Thank you for coming. We are on, actually, we're going to take a 2-week break because the TED office is closed for 2 weeks in the summer, next week, and then the week after. We'll be back upon return with the next installment of TEDx Hangouts. Until then, enjoy summer, winter, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Gerry.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.